fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Vertical Stars Podcast 4th season. How my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. This is an amazing episode because Matthew K. Manning boards the mothership to discuss Paws from Storm King Comics. Now come aboard as we go traversing the stars. I always go over a question of inspiration. So, what inspired your love for comics and who are your earliest influences?
I guess I really started reading comic strips first when I was a kid, and then that kind of turned into when the '89 Batman hit, that movie. It kind of ruined everything for me, and so I read nothing but Batman comics for a long time, and so a lot of my favorite people, like writers like Denny O'Neil, and I got a lot of like Frank Miller and Grant Morrison, and those type, and that kind of led me to the rest of comics as a whole. So, and now I've just read way too much stuff over the years.
You know what? I would say our generation is very fortunate that we have lived through 6 iterations of Batman, a different Batman in the films, and on TV as well. Technically, I guess more than that. I will say, seeing all those different types of iterations, I think really kind of also teaches you a little bit about understanding character because you see Batman as you have a Dark Knight, Michael Keaton, a realistic take on him, the silly versions like with the Batman Robin animated versions. How does that kind of maybe help us all understand how different genres, different styles can vastly change how you view a character?
Well, I think that is one thing about Batman that's entertained me for all these years is that the character is so flexible. He works just as well in humor with the Adam West show as he does with like the real grim and gritty. Like Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns and things like that. I think it just kind of there's something timeless about that particular character that doesn't always work with everybody else, but there is something that strikes a chord about him, and that can inspire me. And I think that's one of the reasons too that I was so taken by the comics themselves is just because he seems to people gravitate towards that character. Everybody seems to have a Batman story they want to tell, or some sort of interpretation they want to put out there in the world. So I think it's kind of like the best of the best go to Batman at some point, and we get those great comics. So, and that, I'm really not sure exactly what it is, whether it's just like the really kind of universal appeal of putting on a mask and doing something good, without anybody knowing it, or, more than that, like the rich playboy fantasy or the knight in shining armor fantasy. It's a little bit of everything. So I think that's just that particular character kind of works for everybody, so, and especially me, because I've written dozens of books about Batman at this point and lots of comics too. So,
well, I kind of feel bad for anyone who's only watching this through audio because they're missing the appearance of your background, which is one of the most incredible Batman setups I think I've ever seen in my life. And it is absolutely tremendous.
Yeah, a large collection that I literally started that year in '89. Well, a little before that when I gravitated towards the old Batman Scooby-Doo crossovers and Batman and the Super Friends. So that was the kind of my character the whole time, and then I just kind of didn't grow up. So
I think for Batman, my favorite iteration of Batman is always going to be the Kevin Conroy Batman, the animated series, Batman Mask of Phantasm version, which to me is the gold, basically, version of any Batman that can be done, in my opinion.
oh yeah, I think it took a lot of the scripts are based on some of the best comics too. So and they really went with just like this great fully formed realized world, which is nice. Everything melded together nice, and they had a weird mix of Art Deco and then some Gothic mix, things like that. So they really knew what they were doing. But yeah, I actually got to do a little bit of work in that world as well. I've done my first comic ever was Justice League Adventures, which was based on the Justice League cartoon, and then probably my biggest project to date was was Batman Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures, which was the Batman the Animated Series world meets the Ninja Turtles, which was, like for me, those things both hit when I was 10, 11 years old, so this was everything for, I always say it's like taking my childhood toys and knocking them together and getting paid for it,
Well, I mean, that's two icons. I mean, Batman is one of the biggest icons in the world of comic books, superheroes. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are one of the greatest icons in the indie comic world. There probably isn't one. I mean, it might be exaggerated. I'm not positive. You probably know better than I do. But in the world of indie comic books, there's probably no greater success story than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Mirage.
Oh yeah, I think so. Unless you really dig into like, say, like Matt Groening's work, kind of like, well, he kind of blew up with The Simpsons, that sort of thing. But well,
Yeah,
it's not like The Simpsons weren't really from comics, so it's kind of he might be the biggest underground cartoonist of all time, but
yeah.
it doesn't get too much bigger than Turtles.
And I think that's incredible. So when you're thinking of creating something, and maybe this is the most important thing from, especially from a writer standpoint, is when you think about Batman, Mutant Ninja Turtles, you're talking about things that are going to have longevity, things that are going to last forever in people's memories. When you're writing your own stories and creating your own characters, as we're going to talk about in a minute with pause, are you thinking in terms of something that's going to have this kind of endurance, or are you thinking of just writing a good story now, and whether or not it has legs or it doesn't, it's whether or not it's a good story for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's always that, like, when you're trying to sell, like, a creator-owned book, there is that, like, this has to be marketable to some degree. This has to appeal to somebody else besides me. But at the same time, if it really appeals to you, then there's got to be somebody else that likes it. No one's like an island, everybody there's a lot of similar tastes, going out in there. And so, and for Pause, it was kind of like this idea of, I did want to do something that would stand the test of time, but at the same time, I wanted to be very much in the moment that it was set. So I actually wrote the story 15 years ago, and it was sold to DC Wildstorm at that time. And there was a long story. The artist that was hired to be a co-creator didn't draw anything for a year. We had to fire him. Wildstorm folded into DC Comics at that point. The book had no place to go. So we got the rights back, and then I, sat on it for a while, kind of didn't really want to do anything with it. And then finally, when I got the opportunity, so I pitched it to Sandy King, who's a movie producer and the wife of John Carpenter from Storm King Comics, yeah, and the publisher of Storm King Comics. And I'd met her at a Comic-Con, and she had introduced me to my editor Sean over there, and I pitched him the story to him because he was saying, well, we don't really need anything horror, but we'd like something science fiction. And Pause was something that I really liked that had science fiction, as the groundwork in the story. But it was kind of like, do I want to, reopen that wound? But I decided to go for it. I pitched it again because I read it and I liked it still. And I don't normally like all my old work, but I really liked this. And so I pitched it to them because I finally got the rights back from DC a while back, and so now they immediately liked it. And then I went to work rewriting the whole thing because, like I was saying, I wanted it to be of the moment. And in the original version, they talked about DVDs, they had flip phones. It was it was a long time ago, and so we had to kind of redo. Well, I redid everything. I changed some characters I wasn't crazy about. I changed some scenes that weren't quite working, made all the other scenes a little bit better. So I'm actually really happy that it's coming out when it's coming out because it's a lot stronger of a 6-issue series than it was when I originally pitched it. So it worked out. Yeah.
But one thing is really interesting that you're talking about that a story that was 15 years ago. Because when I was reading the story, and I was thinking in terms of my brain usually goes there in forms of allegory, things of that nature. And for some reason, the allegory that immediately came to me was COVID and the lockdown. That you have this isolation, being by yourself in the world. Say this large world, everything feels like a shutdown. It's just you. For some reason, that connected to me immediately with Pause. But maybe if that suggests that there's a universality to maybe almost a fear of being suddenly alone in the world, or maybe it is also maybe a little bit to me too, someone who's an introvert. The idea maybe there's a pleasure in the idea, excitement of being the alone in the world. You can do whatever you want. So I mean, and when you were thinking about your story for Pause, what side did you kind of fall? Was it more of the horror of being the only one, or technically it's not the only one, there's no character story, but we'll get to in a moment. But being like alone in this world that's completely shut down and you're kind of on your own, or is there kind of also like wish fulfillment? Oh my God, I'm on my own, I can do anything. So which side did you fall on?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both actually, because it is interesting about you say that about COVID because that was I don't know if it was consciously in my mind, but I'd rewrote it after all of that, and but at the time of when I originally wrote Pause, what had happened, there was a blackout in New York not too long ago before that. And that was very strange with no electricity. And my wife and I walked around the whole city and just explored it and was like, this is weird. Times Square without lights on is a very strange thing. And so that probably got locked somewhere in my brain, that kind of degree of like this strange version of a place that's very familiar. And so, yeah, with Pause, I think what's interesting about it, because the entire concept is time stops for everyone except for our main character, Henry. And he can walk, around the world, but if he touches someone, they become unpaused, but he can't repause them again. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is, there is this fantasy element of like New York is the ultimate playground now. I can do whatever I want. Food stays hot in the best restaurants. I can, go eat there. I can stay at the best penthouse, apartment, as long as I don't mind the guy frozen in the corner, that sort of thing. And the idea, but there's also this other side to it, which is where you get into that John Carpenter thriller aspect, that atmosphere, is that if you really think about the world, and we'll talk about it in future issues and things, but there's no sound. Like it's very quiet in compared to what New York is, because New York is all alive and bustling, and in this story, everybody is paused between seconds. And so just that weird, eerie quiet. And what happens if you unfreeze the wrong person? And we start to get into some of that as the series progresses.
Now, I mean, obviously, I'm dealing with something like Pause. As you said, the world is frozen. And I was wondering if is he stuck between the middles and everything looks paused, or is the world in the universe paused and he's moving within it? So, one, how large is the effect of the pausing? Because from what you're saying, it's not him who's somehow between seconds, it's the world that's stuck in seconds. So how large is that effect that we're looking at? I mean, is even the sun paused? Is everything paused, or is it just Earth, just New York? I mean, how far does this go?
Yeah, and we will get into that later on in the series, so I don't want to give away too much, but it is like everything that he was encountered. So it's like it's 11:13 on a Friday night in New York, and it's going to be 11:13 through our entire series. So the idea of just that, like, and then we did have to figure out how things work, because it doesn't officially work when you really think about a lot of it. Like if you turn the TVs are on, but they're all the same frozen image on every station. I do a dial like we still do. I'm doing a gesture for a dial when we haven't used a dial since the 80s, but that sort of thing. Or like you can manipulate things. You can put in a movie and watch it, or you could, and cell phones work. You can call somebody on a cell phone. Now, how much of this would actually work if time was frozen? Probably nothing. Like I don't even think you'd be able to breathe, officially, scientifically. If everything was stagnant. But in our world, these are the rules we set up, and we're going to stick to them. But we have to. It's that idea of, because you have to. But you have to believe a little bit in this weird concept that we're going. You have to suspend disbelief, and once you do that, then we're going to play within those rules and keep that for the entire story.
So yeah, because when you think about in terms of physics, if everything is frozen, does light move? Is there sound? Is there wind? Can you light something on fire? And will the fire be functioning, or is it frozen? So how deep into the physics of what can work did you kind of think about and incorporate to the story?
Well, I did look up a lot of things, and then I started realizing, it just won't work if we stick to the laws of physics completely, and it won't be fun. It's kind of like, but they can manipulate things. So, like, for instance, there is no wind. Then that's another very eerie thing to imagine, just walking through a quiet world with no wind, no background noise, no animals chirping. You don't hear that normally in New York, but you hear a lot. And so, but there are things like they walk by a window, and there's a bar fight. Someone's thrown a chair through the window, and there's shards of glass in the air, frozen. And if Henry touches them, then they will continue their arc of the way that they were falling. Like, so they were blasting out at you. They'll continue that way. If somebody else bats at them, they'll just fall to the ground. So it's kind of like he's the only one that seems to be able to unpause anybody or anything, and when he does, they continue the motion that they were going in. So, and we try to stick to that as much as we can. We also do it visually, where essentially everything is kind of black and white-ish. Most are very muted tones for the background. Anything Henry touches you'll notice it will have color to it. So he climbs over a fence at one point, and the sections that he touches are filled with color. And it's one of those things where we have to go back. The artist Connor and Boyle and I were like, I'll look back and I'll be like, wait, that he touched that fence in that scene. We just didn't see him do it. And he's like, okay, I'll go back. And he's been really great about it because he loves the idea too, the concept like, oh, well, if he's opening that door, then that doorknob needs to be unpaused, and then we can see. So it's kind of like this whole, really just going back and forth process of like, oh, I didn't even notice that one. That needs to be changed, and things like that. And things do change, and progress as he'll draw it the way he pictures it, which is what every artist should do. I give my guidelines. I went to art college, so I have a artist background, and so I do picture things visually. And apparently I've had a lot of artists tell me that's very helpful, when it comes in, because there are ways to do a scene if I'm asking to, I'm not asking for something impossible, but I always say if you have a better idea, go with it. If you're, the artist, and so he'll re-envision some things differently than I originally pictured it, and then it's kind of a matter of, okay, well, what do we have to change to make this still work, in my vision too? So our visions kind of meld together and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's always a fun process. Like especially when there's a dialogue between me and the artist. Like some editors like to keep them apart, but our editors put us together, and I see every page when it comes in, and it's just been great. Like every once in a while, I'll be like, oh, that clock says the wrong time, and I'll be like, oh yeah, the clock, and go and change the that sort of thing.
Well, I like that. It's an incredible concept. And the responsibility of Henry Jacobs in this world is quite huge. For instance, if he's touching someone, let's say someone was, I believe, let's say on the verge of an injury. If he does touch them, they follow through with that injury, right? Or if someone was bleeding, they will continue to bleed out. It's not just them; it's everything in the whole situation will then become realized, right?
Right.
So, how much responsibility does he have in the world around him? How much does he feel the pressure of being the person who can make the decision that this person deserves to be moving around or not, or this person, if I touch them, it's screwed. So yeah, I better not touch that person. Or how much maybe it is screw that guy. Maybe I will go ahead and do it.
Yeah, that's one of the main questions of the whole thing. Like he feels the responsibility, and the other characters don't seem to. So you see Henry being like, well, maybe we should unfreeze everybody, and some of the other characters are kind of like, well, let's just see what else is going on. And as the series progresses, there is a reason. Everybody has, in our main cast, has a secret, and at least one secret. And so as the series progresses, we'll see more and more of why they are making the decisions the way they are. And for Henry, I kind of view him as almost like a Hamlet-type figure where he's very indecisive. And that'll cost him throughout the story. And it's kind of like, he needs to become this person, fully formed person who can make these decisions, can make these calls and judgment without relying on everybody else. And at first he's kind of just going with the flow, going with what everybody else wants to do. And the only exception really is his love of family. He wants to go check on his brother. That's one of the first things he wants to do. Whereas some of the people he's with don't really want to do anything. They just want to have fun in this world and kind of like escape reality as much as they can. And you see him want to do, it's a huge temptation, but he also feels like a responsibility. Like if they go into a store and take something, like to eat or something, he's like, well, maybe we should leave some money. And they're like, well, how many dollars do you have in your wallet? Like, most, everybody really doesn't rely on that anymore. Like, do we have to do digital transactions at every store we go to, or, they'll never know. And it's kind of like this, he has a very strong moral compass, but he also, in the sense that he doesn't want to rock the boat. He's never really rocked the boat in his whole life, and he's kind of gone with the flow. And so the idea is, even in this extreme situation, things are going to happen that he's going to have to stop, and going with the flow and making his own mind up. And that'll happen. This is a 6-issue story, and this first arc. And the idea is, ideal situation, we would love to do 18 issues. At least I would, for sure. Now, that doesn't, not to say that's, I'm not putting any words in Storm King's mouth. It's how it sells, or even in the artist's mouth. Like they might not be interested after this, but it's something to tell the story with it has deliberate pacing. I wouldn't say it's slow, but it intentionally lets you explore the world as you would if you were in this world. At least that's my goal. And so in order to keep that pacing consistent through the whole story, I would love to tell 18 issues total, and that will explain everybody's secret and everything that happened. if we get only 6 more issues, then some of those secrets will probably stay buried. You know, but if we don't get any more issues, then there'll be a couple secrets and that's it. You know, so it's
Well, I mean, I assume one secret that's going to be, I don't know if it'll be revealed in the first arc, but I'm sure it's going to exist, or depends how big of a secret it is. Henry Jacobs, obviously being the one who can do that, has this power, and is the first one who actually is unfrozen. Is his lot a product of fate, or is he, or there is a reason why it's him? Is it just like dumb luck, or or is it because of him?
I mean, there's definitely an answer to that question. I'm not sure if I want to answer it yet without putting in too much. The characters are asking that right away. I'll say that much. There's a character they meet around I think issue 2, and that character is asking this, like, what's with this guy? Does he have a secret? Why is he the only one able to do this? And so there definitely are answers to that. The whole thing is, even from the original pitch, I have the ending figured out. You know, it's not, so it is something it's not like a Lost situation, you know, where that show where they're just kind of writing as they went, you know, by the end. It definitely has an ending that was intended the whole way through. And so it's just how much we can fit in the middle, you know, depending on format will be the big thing. This first one is really the most horrific of the 6 issues. And then of the series. So this first 6 issue arc, and there is a beginning, middle, and end to this story, and but it does have the most, I think, John Carpenter-y elements, you know, for at least what he's most known for. And then we get into some more. It'll still be a thriller all the way through, but there'll be a lot. There'll be some action. There'll be some personal drama, this kind of thing. When we get, and I really hope to make people feel for these characters by the end, you know, if we get to do more. So,
Well, I'm going to use the word chosen, though that it does have connotations that I'm not making you go into the fact, you know, that he's not, you know, chosen, or he is the one who's doing the unfreezing thing. But obviously the connotation with that is religious. I'm not trying to go in that direction necessarily. But how screwed are we that Henry Jacobs is the guy who has this power? I mean, should we feel confident that this is the guy who can do this, or we should be like, oh, son of a bitch, it's this guy who has to make that decision?
well, I think compared to the other characters in the book, it's probably pretty good. Like, he's going to meet some characters that are not great, but and I think I think that's the thing, that it is good that Henry is the one to have that power because of his just his sense of morality. He does have a very strong sense of right and wrong. Again, probably to a fault, you know, where he, you know, kind of has to almost be peer pressured into doing things, you know, like. But so I think I mean, the fact that he is indecisive is a problem, but the idea that he's not going to do something, you know, morally bankrupt with this ability, where many people would, you know, there's been plenty of stories, kind of like, you know, this isn't the first story about stop time, you know, it's been back. I remember being interested in stop time stories from like Saved by the Bell, you know, when Zach Morris used to do a timeout, you know, that sort of thing. But what Henry does with it is going to be a different thing, and also the approach to it, this kind of slow approach. I kind of compare it more to something like how The Walking Dead handles zombies. It's very you really get to explore the world, and that's what I'm so interested in. I love world building in any of the stuff I do, and so the idea that you can really explore this playground with the characters. And there's some issues that are a little non-traditional in that format, where there's more exploring than there is some of the other elements you would expect at that point in the story. And luckily, Storm King has let us do this interesting kind of. Again, I don't really want to say slow, because I think it keeps you interested, and I think a lot of stuff happens. But it is this kind of like slowly building burn that I think will be, you know, more interesting, especially when the terrible things start to happen, and there will be some terrible things.
Well, I'll say, I mean, the story offers a lot of philosophical questions. For instance, as a person myself, and as a observer of humans in general, we're a relatively selfish, somewhat greedy species for the most part. I mean, I'm kind of pessimistic, but I'm just kind of, you know, going in that direction a little bit. However, what is the benefit to Henry to unfreeze anybody? He has a world that's his and every resource possible at his disposal. what is the motivation he has to want to unfreeze anybody who then now is a competitor for resources and any other needs that he has? Is it just because it's the right thing to do? Is there some other sense of I can't be in a world by myself? What is possibly motivating him to want to even unfreeze any other possible competitor, individual danger in the
Mhm.
world around him?
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting question because I think that's what we're kind of asking with the series too. Like it is kind of a what would you do kind of situation, and I think his real motivation is because he does feel like he feels maybe guilty that it's him getting, maybe like, oh, am I taking advantage of these people? It's the wrong thing to do if I leave everybody in this state of helplessness. So that's his motivation, and you'll see some of the there's other motivations from some of the other characters, and they all are kind of they have their own ideas of what this world should be as the story keeps going too, which is kind of fun. There's some scenes where characters sneak off, and we're not going to find out what they do for a while. Like so, I feel like there's a lot of moments like that, where it's everybody. I think there's a reason to be kind of suspicious of everybody, and even Henry, because Henry does have his secrets, but he's also not aware of everything that like no one is aware of why this is happening. At least we don't think so, and so it's kind of like we'll have to when you get more into the characters, you'll find out some know a little bit more than they're saying and that sort of thing. And then we'll keep introducing some new faces as the series progresses. And whether that's good or not for our main cast, it's like it won't really. It's just kind of the situations they find themselves in. So,
Um, my next couple of questions, feel free to flag me for spoilers, and I'll cut it. But I'm going to ask it anyway, and you feel free to dance around, cut, or answer the question completely. In the first issue, which I had the pleasure to read, the first character that is unfrozen is a character, I'm going to say the name wrong, Halima Gosh. Am I saying it correctly?
Halima is there.
Halima
Yeah.
Gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay.
It's like a gauche, like yeah.
Ghosh. Okay. Halima Ghosh. Um, she, like I said, is the first person that is unfrozen. There's also a dog. How she does not seem to be the best influence on Henry. She seems to be like the id on Henry's shoulder that gives him every bad idea possible. Is it is it how bad of luck that she's the one who's the first one to be able to whisper in his ear what to do?
Yeah, Halima definitely does have something about her. Like Henry's had a crush on this character, so he's kind of influenced by her immediately. Kind of like, well, I'm just, he wants to hang out with her. That's kind of like, so what does it take to hang out with this person? Well, we'll just, we're not doing anything harmful. In his mind, that's what he's kind of thinking. But if you, no, this is not really a spoiler. It's only the first couple of pages. But if you look, she's holding she has luggage with her. She has a small rolling luggage, which you normally don't have on the subway at 11:13 at night. So there are things there from the get-go that are kind of like, if you look at it and look at some of the specifics, you're wondering, well, what's going on with her? And we will find out all of it if we get enough time. So it's one of those situations. But what she is a really fun. She proved to be so much fun writing, just because she's secretive, but she has this really this optimistic kind of attitude, like throughout the story. And whether there's a reason. I mean, there is a reason for everything, but she's very excited to be in this world now. So it's an unexpected thing. She's adapted to it, and she's like, all right, this is gonna, let's go have fun. And so whether why she wants this distraction so badly, what this is, we'll find out. But but yeah, I don't know if I don't think it's definitely necessarily a negative influence. It is someone required for Henry to make him do something. Like, I mean, if it was up to Henry, he would probably just start unpausing everybody and try to get the world back to normal, and not really, and he would probably find himself in some, lab room being, like people like asking, or in a police precinct being questioned, and so it's kind of like why was he the first one, that sort of thing. So it's but yeah, she is specifically required by our plot to motivate Henry to get moving and in a fun direction. So that's I guess all I'll say about her for now.
So with Helena Ghosh, um, I mean, right now her and Henry or at least for Henry's sake, he's the last man on Earth technically at the moment, right? Um, which is kind of good for him if he likes this girl. He's like the last man on Earth who she can literally be with at this point. Um, there's also a question, I guess, her interest in him. In many ways, not only is he the last man on Earth, but he's also, I mean, he has a sort of pseudo, almost godlike power at the moment. He has the power over the ability to make anyone be alive again, as it were. What is her interest in him? Is it just he's the only guy available? Is it that what he can do is actually relatively incredible at this point from a power standpoint? Or is it legit this guy is interesting and she was going to be interested in regardless of the situation?
Well, I don't necessarily think that she's interested in him at first at all. Like, I don't. I think she realizes I'm on the ground floor of something. I want to be here and explore this. This is an opportunity. Don't pass this up. Don't. But I think it's more of like she sees Henry as just what he is, which is really he just seems to be the most harmless guy on the planet. Like kind of someone like, all right, I can pal around with this guy. I don't know if there's necessarily a romantic interest there from her. She's everybody seems to have a lot going on, and that sort of thing. But it's very clear from the beginning that Henry is definitely he's had a crush on her. He's seen her on her morning commute all the time. He's never talked to her. And oh look, now I'm in the room with this person, and I'm the person, and for some reason she doesn't want to talk to anybody else. She doesn't want to unfreeze anybody else. She wants to hang out with me. So that's what's going through Henry's head. This is a good thing for Henry in this kind of thing that otherwise might be really scary. It might be something like, oh my God, like what do I do? Why is no one else, reacting to what the situation is, what's happening. So I think she also eases the tension on that, and her just this kind of almost youthful exuberance of oh my, we get to play, let's go do something fun, that's also very contagious. So I think when you're ever around somebody like that, you're kind of like, even if you're in in a bad place, it's kind of like, all right, well, let's this seems like a better choice. Let's do what she's thinking. She seems to have everything together. She knows what she's doing. Let's go have fun. Let's go see the world.
So the other thing they mentioned too is that there's other threats in this world. Being the nature of this world, there's two kind of threats I can imagine. But my imagination may also be limited, so maybe feel free to flag me on that one as well. One potential threat is whoever he unfreezes is a potential threat. And the other potential threat is that maybe that there's supernatural potential threats. How grounded is the threat that you're talking about? And is it a threat that he is creating, or is already there that he's going to bump into?
I think there's a little. I don't necessarily want to say if it's scientific or supernatural yet, in the story. Like I said, it's all been figured out. But because I think it's kind of more fun to like, where is this going, as a reader. But I think there are some very realistic threats he's going to meet, and some threats that are a little bit more far fetched in what we would consider, realistic. So I think there's going to be different levels of threat that he's going to face. Like there'll be some threats that might seem like he can overcome, easier than some just seem more impossible, which is, like the story will continue to build, and especially if we get more issues. And so it's one of those things where the danger will increase as long as our story keeps going, and everything will start falling into place here and there. And there'll be some, I'm planning, not in this first 6 issues, I am planning some issues, at least one issue for certain, depending on room, that will be a complete flashback issue and really tell a lot of stuff, which Connor probably won't like because they don't have to color the whole thing. Whereas, he gets off easier on the coloring right now with the muted palette for, when the paused world. But there will be some, there are some scenes with flashbacks. We'll meet some other characters, hopefully, if we get to all this, and some of those characters will have interesting backstories as well. Some will not tie into our cast, and some will, but in ways that might be unexpected.
Is the dog out of the story at this point?
Oh, Bartleby? No, Bartleby is a presence in the book. So we're gonna see Bartleby a lot. Bartleby is named after the I think it's the Melville story, Bartleby the Scrivener,
Yeah.
which it's a weird story that I really love. I read when I was in like junior high, and it's just about a character that says I prefer not to all the time, and just lets the world unfold around him and just like refusing to participate in the world. And so Bartleby is just this silly little character that I've been excited to see drawn for the and Connor just nails it. It's like exactly what I was hoping for with Bartleby, just like this stubborn little, like mascot that will be around.
That's awesome.
But it's kind of also like it also speaks to the idea that the theme of if you unfreeze somebody or something, then they are unfrozen with you. So like you're stuck with whatever. So whoever Henry unfreezes, he's stuck with them in one form or another, and it's or you have to deal with what you've unleashed on the world, and that sort of thing is going to be a constant theme. Like, and it's also something that Halima is acutely aware of from the beginning when there's a scene where he's going into a bar and she's like, "Whoa, don't touch anybody because it's a crowded bar," or like she does things for him, like she'll move people out of the way or something, and they're just like stiff mannequins to her, but if he touches them, then that person they have to explain this to again at the very least, they have to explain it to. Then this person might want to be with them, and they don't know if Henry is the only one that has this ability to unfreeze. Maybe they can unpause somebody. Maybe that person can unpause somebody else. It's all things that we'll explore throughout the series.
That does bring up one other question I was thinking about. Sorry, with the dog, for some reason was the one that kind of brought it to my head, but it could be almost any character. Let's say the dog bites someone who's frozen. Do they receive the impact of the injury? I mean, can they be hurt even while frozen? How dangerous is it for these other people let's say he unfreezes someone who is a bad guy and tries to injure a frozen individual. Can they be hurt? And if they unfreeze, will they now face that injury as well?
Yeah, I think on both counts. It's kind of like that rule of what I was talking about with the shard of glass. The other characters can bat it out of the way. So when they bat it out of the way, that glass will shatter when it hits the ground. So if they injure someone, that person will be injured. Whether like if someone's cut, whether the blood will react the same way. It's kind of something you'll see as the series goes. Something like if things like this happen. I mean, there are going to be some things that happen. So it's kind of like they do have to be careful. These are still living human beings that can be manipulated. Like if you picked a guy up in Central Park and moved him, to 34th Street, he's going to wake up in 34th Street if he ever becomes unpaused. And it's. Yeah. Or if time ever restarts, he's going to be like, what just happened? Like, why am I here? Did I just like zone out while I was walking? And so that kind of stuff has to be all in our minds as we're writing this, or as we're writing and drawing this. And one of the things that's fun is when you see a character on a street, anytime you go back to the street, that character has to be there. So we have to have a large, a visual vocabulary of what's going on, and that requires. Even when I was writing the script, it required a lot of I need this character to be on this park bench in this scene in issue 2, and then because this character is going to come into play when they go past that park in issue 6 or something. So there's a lot of continuity involved that has to be there in order for this to feel realistic and feel like. And again, this is also one of the things I wanted this to be as realistic as possible. So when I used to live in New York, because I lived in New York for about a decade, I live in Asheville, North Carolina now. But when I was in New York at 11:13 on a Friday, I walked across the Manhattan Bridge. And then on a different 11:13, I walked different parts of the story. So I've walked everywhere they go in this first 6 issues, almost the exact, within the hour time frame on a Friday when this happened in the fall, because this is October 13th, I believe. I think it's October. I can't remember now. I think it is. But so it's in. I noticed things. I took a ton of photo reference at the time, and so we have that photo reference for our artist who lives out in England. But we also have Google Earth now, and things like this that can help. But it won't be the exact time frame. So, for instance, on a Friday, walking on Avenue B in New York City, I noticed, there are trash. All the trash bags are out in front of the apartment. And that's in the script, so that's in there now, and like there's a lot of that. There's also a lot of fun things from my life that I got to put in. You could see an apartment I lived in. You see the door of it on because I used to live in Avenue B after college. So you see that door. You see bars that are real bars that or used to be real bars. You know, those kind of things. They go in and interact with all this kind of stuff. We wanted it to feel as New York as possible, even though neither of us are there. So but I had such a large New York made such a big impact on me. I'm from Ohio, in the middle of nowhere in the country. So when I lived in New York, went to college there, and then lived there for probably about 12 years total. Lived in different parts of Brooklyn. All the parts that I know, I'm putting into the story, and there's a lot of different areas, because I want it to feel like that, and and all that reference is still available, and it's on I've uploaded it to our server and everything, so we're trying to make it. And there are other things, like I walked over the Manhattan Bridge and by the time we were off, it was probably about midnight, and there was a soccer game happening at the base of the bridge, and it's like a full game, like full teams. And it's like, what are the odds of that happening, at midnight on a Friday night in New York? But that's one of the things that walking really helped. You really got to see, everything that's happening at that exact moment. And so there's a lot of that. And if we get to do more, I want to do more of that on my visits, because I'll go back to New York at least normally every Comic-Con, which is around the season that pause takes place. So if I can stay with some of my friends, a lot of times when if they'll still tolerate me, and those kind of things. And so there will be other opportunities too, if we get to do more, to get to go to some of the other neighborhoods exactly at the right time, see what's happening right now, at that 11:13 time on a Friday.
So I don't know if it's more difficult for you or the artist, but was there any, because you do at that level, keep up that level of continuity, was there a feeling for the artist to be like, let's go to new places? I don't want to keep trying to remember what the hell is happening in this one scene from this many issues ago. Let's go somewhere new so I can keep it fresh, or not keep it fresh, but not have to worry about that level of continuity that existing.
Yeah. Well, so far Connor is just finishing up issue 2 and starting issue 3, so he's not sick of us yet, But and so far he's been really interested in doing. I mean, he has a realistic style, and he does these really dynamic compositions and angles and things that a lot of things I didn't picture that way. And then when I see him, I'm like, oh, that works. Like it's kind of one of the fun parts about working with him. And so far, he hasn't shied away from any of the things we need. He'll do some panels where it's just like the character kind of in a white background, which is fine. But if we need an element in the story, that's there. If we need to show the street, we need to remind the viewer, the reader, every once in a while, this is where we are. We're in Tompkins Square Park in Brooklyn. Let's look, or what does that look like? And here's a shot of it, And so he does he does a good mix of establishing shots and all this, everything the story needs. And then there'll be there are some weird things that even from issue 1, I've hidden some things in issue 1 that will come into play later. And luckily, every once in a while there'll be. I don't think we've ever really. I don't think we've come across something that he didn't include or something that I had to be like, oh no, this needs to be here. So far, it's so good, but he's not necessarily keyed into all. Like he's read all the pitches, he's read everything there is to read, but not my personal notes. So there's still some things that even he doesn't know yet. And so it's kind of like if one of those come up, I'll have to be like, oh no, we need that is important because of this. That's symbolism. We've put some symbolism in there already in issue 1, and it's just kind of silly little things that no one will notice, but maybe as you're reading it, your subconscious will absorb this and be like, give you more of an eerie feeling when you need it, or more of a joyful feeling when you need that. So those, I try to keep that in mind the whole time, and I don't know how successful, I'll be at it, but we just try as best we can. So.
Well, like I said, Paul's, the first issue was fantastic. I had the pleasure of reading it, and it was extremely well done.
Oh, thank you.
When can our listeners look forward to getting their hands on the first issue?
I believe it's February. I want to say February 26th or 27th. It's right in there. I know you can. The one thing about Storm King is that they have been around for about a decade, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. One thing, though, that they don't necessarily, they're kind of newer to some of the comic ordering processes. I know that they have a better system of distribution than they used to. So that's just a long way of saying that if you pre-order, you definitely will get it. Yeah. If you your store might not carry that, in different stores big city stores have the ability to carry more titles than smaller stores. You know, I'm like I said, I'm from Ohio, so if you wanted anything that wasn't mainstream superhero, even a lot of the mainstream superhero books, you had to reserve it. So you can still reserve it now until near the end of January, I think, is the when the pre-order cutoff date is. Um, and then I've been, if you follow any of my social media stuff, I've been posting a lot of those links. I have a Substack newsletter. My newest issue is going to be all about Paws, and it's coming out in the next day or two, and that'll have all the pre-order information too. I know right now you can also pre-order the second issue. The cover's already been revealed. It's again, Tim Bradstreet's doing our covers, and it's another one of his, and it's just great. He's getting more. The first one starts out realistic, and then he kind of gets a little bit. I forget what the word he was using, but he kind of it gets a little less realistic and has a little more symbolism and a little bit more iconographic imagery. And so as his covers progress, and it's kind of it's been really fun to see those as well, because he didn't even have character designs when he was first doing the covers, because that needed to become so fast. So the way he worked around it was just brilliant. So we were getting some really neat covers. But yeah, you can order the first two, but you can also just call your comic shop and say, John Carpenter's Tales of Sci-Fi, the Paws, the Paws arc, which is starting in February. I'd like to order all 6, and then you're safe that way. Most stores will order from you and hold them for you. Most don't require deposits, so but always pay your comic store for things you order, because comic stores their margins are slim, and we want I want as many around as possible, because it's one of my favorite things to do when I'm traveling, to pop into another store. So it's one of those things that it's a great way to support a local business, and you're supporting your artists, and there's not much downside in comics. There's no billionaire artists being like, I sucked some more money out of the rubes today. It's all people that are making comics because they love comics. You don't make a fortune on comics. You're there because it's the medium that you love for whatever reason. So I'm always about supporting all these kind of projects, and I'm hoping people will enjoy ours too. And like I said, if we get good sales, then hopefully we can do more. And that's my end goal for this one, is really to tell the whole story. And I have so many fun things planned. I think the first 6 issues I love, and I think it even gets better. I think when you start to peel some of the layers away from some of the characters, I think it's going to be some real unexpected twists for people.
Well, like I said, I really enjoyed that first issue, and I'm very curious what you do with the second issue. Mr. Manning, it was an absolute pleasure to talk with you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Have a very good night.
You too.